Hello everyone, Hoyoverse just released an absolutely massive, almost 9-minute animated teaser called The God's Limits, not only showcasing Pierro's plan with the Fatui in Nodikrai and the Snezhnaya, but also revealing the designs of the Primordial ones for Shining Shades. And as a nice little bonus on the side, this teaser, as you are going to see as we go through it, confirms a number of theories that I discussed in my two most recent Genshin Impact lore videos about Naberius, and most recently Istaorth and Asmoday. So, since I've got a shit ton of lore videos that I'm currently working on for Amphorius, Cyrene, and Phynon, let us get through this as fast as possible. And before I even play the video, we've got something to talk about already. So this animated short instantly sets the scene with the reflection on the water of a corvid, whether it's a crow, raven, it doesn't matter. So we have a corvid on the screen, and it's obviously black in color. Now, let me show you the transition. We go through the reflection of this corvid in the water and we see the real bird, it's white. Now, a crow, most of the time, or a corvid, symbolizes death, it symbolizes trickery, but it also symbolizes wisdom. Why does it symbolize wisdom? It's because corvids in Norse mythology, and we all know why Norse mythology is so important to Genshin Impact, especially when we take into consideration not only Khaenri'ah, but the fact that Genshin and its 4 cycles of Hyperborea, Natlantine, Remuria, and Crown Aria, at least that's what the Narzisenkreuz Ordo calls them, they are inspired by the 4 cycles of the Ring of Nibelung, which is a 4-cycle Germanic opera written by Wilhelm Richard Wagner and inspired by Norse mythology. And one of the most prominent characters in the Ring of Nibelung is the god Odin, known in that play as Wotan. And as we know, Odin, ravens, they symbolize him. They symbolize the All-Father, the supreme deity in the Nordic pantheon. Now, do keep in mind that I am not saying this crow is supposed to be the crow of Odin or the crow of whoever Odin's equivalent in Genshin is. All I am saying is that the crow can be thematically symbolic of the god Odin, since he is going to be relevant, as you are about to see, just in a few minutes. Now, let me show you the transition. So we go from a black crow, which symbolizes, conventionally at least, death and trickery and wisdom, into a white crow through reflection of the water. And white is the true color of the bird, at least if we assume that this is not an illusion, which you can kind of debate that this is an illusion, as we're about to see with the shades. However, for now, let's just assume this is the real bird. The white crow over here should symbolize the idea of transformation and the idea of new birth and renewal. And we are about to see why this is important. The woman here should be some kind of imitation of the witch Anya Andersdottir.
This world has always been so.
I'm pretty sure that should be Anya, the voice matches. So this could be an illusion or a memory of Anya recreated from Rhinodottir's powers. Now they show us the shades. She says over here, life abides no reason.
Life abides no reason.
Of course, this is what Naberius used to look like before she was devoured, or her heart was devoured by the sinner Rhinodottir, one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah. And it's worth noting that when I look at Naberius in this frame, I obviously see a bit of Focalors and even a bit of Egeria, which is relevant since Naberius created the goddess Egeria in the Primordial Sea to serve as a substitute heart for the first Hydro Dragon, Nouvelette's predecessor, and therefore it makes logical sense for Naberius to look somewhat similar to Focalors and Egeria, because she is kind of the mother of Egeria and kinda the grandmother of Focalors, because Focalors is an Oceanid, or at least used to be one, who was created as a familiar of Egeria by Egeria herself. So Naberius is like kinda somewhat a grandmother to Focalors. Oh, and the shades, all of them have white hair, which is something that I expected a very, very long time ago. I talked about this almost about a year ago in one of my lore theories.
For none are born by their own consent.
Oh, and if you are wondering why I always expected for them to have white hair in their true appearance, it's because the shades and the primordial one itself are, in my mind at least, they should be all of them XPs of the Qiyana character archetype. And when I say XPs, I also mean variations. To me, those two concepts are interchangeable. I generally use the term variants or variations more often. And when I say the Qiyana character variant, that also includes another variation of the Qiyana character archetype, as I call it, which is Kevin Kaslana. To me, Kevin and Qiyana are the same design. Kevin is just Qiyana but male. That's really the whole thing.
Death.
And if you don't know who Kevin is, well, here he is on the screen now, and you can also see him in the form of Finon or Kaslana in Star Rail at the moment.
Abides no reason.
Anya continues saying death abides no reason, and she shows us Naberius, Ronova. Of course, we have already seen Ronova's eye in Natlan when she was talking to Mavuika and Ualtikuten, before Thrain came in and utilized his paradox as a leverage against Ronova in order to merge himself with the Lord of the Night and gain the death he desired. The most interesting detail here is that Ronova has the same design as the statue of the omnipresent god in Inazuma, which, well, I suppose this is a really, really cool detail because I made a number of videos discussing Ronova's influence in Inazuma, which remains unseen yet ever present, even though she has not been discussed too much. But if you look in the right places, especially on Tsurumi Island, not only with the boatman, but also with the god of Tsurumi Island, Kana Kapatsir, you will realize that Kapatsir's story lines up really, really well with what we see in Natlan, and also the feather that Kapatsir gives us is similar to the ancient names in Natlan, which are obsidian feathers. Of course, I have already explained all of this stuff in much better detail in my previous videos.
For it cannot be defied.
Oh, and of course, Ronova should be the female figure who gave Kapatsir her original name, which is the name that she forgot by the time she met Ru.
Even by those who see it coming. Time abides no reason. For it deprives us all equally.
I suppose Istaorth has golden hair, however, when we see Istaroth's actual appearance, you'll notice that she looks quite similar to Qiyana.
Yet brooks not a second to be reclaimed. Space abides no reason.
Now, I find it really interesting that the developers, they did this obviously on purpose. They cut Anya, or at least Anya's simulation, telling us what's going on with Asmoday, because clearly this is a major plot point in the current events of Genshin Impact. So they are trying to hide as much as possible from this shade. Of course, I speculated for a long time that Asmoday is going to be the Shade of Space. This is an extremely old speculation, and not even from mine. I've seen many people as well make this speculation ever since, well, a few years after the game came out at least. And yeah, it's a very solid theory and just got confirmed. When it comes to her name, Asmoday, we have known that this was her demon name ever since the game came out. This was data mined almost immediately after the game came out. It is not new information whatsoever. And of course, it's worth mentioning that for every single one of the shades, we always hear the exact same line. They say life abides no reason, death abides no reason, and then they say time abides no reason and space abides no reason. Reason in this context is supposed to be the primordial one, the usurper king, the crown of logos, the crown of logic. Reason is the heavenly principles. It is the ultimate principle of Celestia and the one who rules the four shades. So when they say the shades abide no reason, this is of course referencing how the king of reason, the primordial one, the crown of logic, the usurper king, the heavenly reaver as Kukulkan calls it, is currently incapacitated and currently asleep, but as the shades say later on, they will eventually awake.
No reason. The ruler of space stopped the golden-haired twin travelers and mercilessly tore them apart.
Of course, we have excellent imagery over here where we see the Sustainer's cubes, or Asmoday's cubes, now that we can call her by that name freely. They form symbolically the shape of chains in order to signify how she chained at least one of the two siblings, I would say both, into Tivat and controlled their fate in that way.
Tore them apart!
So, of course, Ronova shows up over here and kills Anya. One of the reasons why I think this should be a recreation of Anya from Rhinodottir's memory is because of the following. We have the book, the pinion, and, well, I guess the story over here. These are all symbolic of Anya herself, so they should probably be Anya. And obviously, when I say Anya, I mean a recreation, not the real one. Now, it's interesting that Ronova, specifically Ronova, is the one who killed the crow, notice? The crow is trying to escape, and then Ronova steps on it and stabs it. This detail is worth mentioning. We can see the Triquetra, very, very important symbol of Celestia. It's also present with not only the Celestials, but also the dragons, and kind of the Descenders. You can see it on Child. He's not a Descender, but he's supposed to reference Ajax the hero, and Ajax the hero, as we know, was possessed by the Voyager. At least that's the current best assumption we have, and the Voyager should be the second Descender. We can see, of course, Ronova, she has a Triquetra on her dress. Also, for some reason, she looks almost exactly like how I imagined her. But, yeah, let's continue.
No. This looks more like Rhinodottir's doing.
Yeah, so Ronova over here confirms that this space was created by Rhinodottir, and since Rhinodottir is a witch of the Hexen Circle, she knows Anya, and therefore could create Anya in her space. Now, take a look at the blue fire that you see over here. This type of blue fire appears in Peruer's animated short, the Arlecchino animated cutscene, I guess, if you guys remember that one. At the start of that cutscene, you see a blue spark of a flame from which a bunch of toys emerge, and those toy dolls eventually become the children who kill each other until only one king remains, and that king is Peruer, in that story at least. And this type of blue fire we see with Rhinodottir's realm over here is, of course, very reminiscent of that flame. This could just be soul fire, by the way.
Please don't litter other people's spaces with your bizarre creations.
Unsurprisingly, all life here has been rendered unstable, tainted by the ruler of space. I have seen enough to know that repeating this experiment would be fruitless.
Now, what Rhinodottir says here is extremely interesting because she is directly confirming that Asmoday is tainting life in different domains, which is expected. You can expect for Asmoday to have control over domains, given how she is the shade of space, and domains are just a bunch of space pockets.
You seem to wield my power as if it were nothing but a
Now, of course, this is Naberius talking to Rhinodottir. They exist at the same time, but the one who has authority over the body is Rhinodottir herself, Gold.
plaything for your amusement. Although merging with you has stripped me of agency, I shall still continue to voice my
And now we know this is another detail that we can keep in mind if you ever want to tell the difference between Naberius and Gold. The biggest indicator to me is the flower surrounded by the DNA strings, the deoxyribonucleic acid strings behind their head. This is blue when it's Naberius, and it's gold when it's Rhinodottir herself.
disapproval. My dear Rhinodottir, you have my respect, Naberius. Your nagging is one of the only things that can get under my skin.
And you, Istaorth? Why did you bestow history upon them?
I had to find some way to pass the time, did I not? After all, it's clear that Asmoday is not here.
So a number of things to mention very quickly. Ronova asks Istaorth why she bestowed history upon them. I assume by them she is talking about the imaginary beings who were created inside this domain. Istaorth gave them history, and by giving them history, she also gave them different layers of time. The reason I am bringing this detail up is because if you guys have seen my most recent video about Istaorth herself with Ether, Lumine, and Asmoday, I mentioned how Morax, Zhongli, in addition to being the god of contracts, is also the god of history on Teyvat. This is literally one of his titles. He's called the God of History. Now, of course, he's probably called that symbolically. However, it is worth mentioning because one of Zhongli's biggest endeavors is to overcome erosion and figure out a way to preserve history almost perfectly. He tried doing it through stone. However, later on, he found that the Traveler is a much better alternative because the Traveler is someone who will journey across Teyvat and record and remember the world of Teyvat in their memories and thus preserve it almost in its entirety as they cross through the Celestial Atlas. This connection between Morax and Istaorth may prove to be useful later down the line, especially considering that Istaorth is likely responsible or at least plays a hand in erosion. And erosion, of course, is a major player in geological processes, which is relevant to Morax once again because Morax is the Lord of Geo. And of course, in addition to all of these plot points that Istaorth may have with Morax in the future, she also happens to be the one who helped Makoto grow the sacred Sakura tree, and she is, of course, a person who played a very major hand in the creation of Barbatos in one way or another. Either she made him from something with her own hands, similar to how Naberius created Egeria, or she is, Barbatos' mother. But notwithstanding the exact connection, what matters is that Istaorth is obviously very, very much related to Barbatos. And interestingly, they also happen to share the exact same voice actors throughout every single language. In Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and English, they have the same voice actor, Barbatos and Istaorth, which is really cool. However, if you ask me, I am personally more interested with what she has to do with erosion and history and all of that stuff, which ties into Morax and Zhongli. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to talk about is that, yes, she looks like Kiana.
It's clear that Asmoday is not here.
Well, perhaps you could share your input a little earlier next time. But you're right. There's no trace of Asmoday here. Where has she gone? Anyway, it's time I put this space out of its misery.
These meetings are just a formality. Does it really matter that only 3 of us are here?
I, for one, think that we should find her.
I should probably mention that a lot of people are going to be in my comments telling me how much Rhinodottir is similar to Aponia. That does not change what I said about Naberius. Rhinodottir and Naberius are two different characters. Bro, I sometimes have to predict the stupid shit people are gonna try to tell me. By the way, saying that Rhinodottir is similar to Aponia is not a problem, but trying to use that as a way to disprove that Naberius is similar to Kiana or any of that other stuff, that's the logical error.
Principles cast us as shades. Not one of us has ever missed a meeting.
What if she just switched sides? Finding her would do more harm than good.
Now there's an interesting idea. Better than being devoured.
Just switched sides? You make it sound like such a trivial affair. We are shades, shadows of the heavenly principles. It's unthinkable. Unless she loves her new master more than her own self.
Okay, so what Ronova says here is absolutely massive. Everything else they talked about before is references to things we already knew. We already knew that the shades are shadows of the heavenly principles. They are shadows of the Primordial One. They were created by the Primordial One to be as such. That's the point. But when it comes to her mentioning that Asmoday loves her new master more than her own self, this is very, very big because it implies Asmoday, one of the four shades, is currently working with someone else. Now, who might that person be? Well, the first character who pops up in my head is the Traveler, in which case Asmoday would be Paimon. But this idea is incredibly stupid, let me tell you why. Paimon and Asmoday have two different demon names, and unless we get a confirmation that a demon god can change their own demon name, which I guess you can argue that a shade due to their high standing amongst celestial gods is capable of changing their demon name, but we don't have any evidence of that. Unless we can see evidence of a demon god changing their demon name, I cannot really buy the idea that Paimon is Asmoday. However, one could argue that after the Sustainer sealed the Traveler and sent them effectively into the future, or at least put them into hibernation, she already had the Abyss sibling in a cube on her hand. So, the new master of Asmoday may actually be the Abyss sibling, which this would create a really, really interesting dynamic later down the line. It might also explain why we saw the Sustainer watching over Aether and Lumine while they were discussing the revival of Conria in A Space and Time for You at the end of that quest. We of course see the rift of Asmoday, and the implication is that, well, in my case it's Lumine. The implication is that the Abyss sibling noticed Asmoday's presence, because we get a cut and we see the Abyss sibling looking towards the rift of Asmoday and saying, who is this person? Like stuff like that. I'm obviously paraphrasing. But she does not bring it up to her, or the Abyss sibling does not bring it up to the Traveler. So it could be the case that Asmoday is currently working with the Abyss sibling out of regret, guilt, I don't know, something along those lines. However, it is very much possible that she is Paimon, but I personally do not buy this idea simply because we do not have proof or evidence that demon gods can change their demon names. And if Asmoday is Paimon, then something really weird happened. I could, however, buy the idea that Asmoday created Paimon, similar to how, well, I suppose Istaorth in this case created Barbatos. This is something I can believe. However, when it comes to Asmoday herself being Paimon, we need more evidence for that.
Self.
And the evidence obviously has to be more than just the triquetra on their design, because Ronova also has the triquetra. It's even Nouvellette has the triquetra. It's a silly comparison.
Ronova, do you know that you're being watched?
This scene is really cool. So Istaorth notices that someone is watching Ronova, and Ronova, look what she's about to say.
By whom? Whose gaze could pierce this far?
Yo, this is fucking cold, bro. This is so cool. Imagine you have these really powerful celestial gods discussing the fate of the world, and then way down below, we have the director of the Fatui. Bro, the amount of aura that Pierro just farmed with this single scene is insane. And by the way, for people who have not yet seen this conversation, if you want to know more about Pierro's character, I highly recommend you read Perouer's character stories, because in one of them, I think it is her fourth character story, she talks with Pierro about the book Perinheri, where he tells her to read it in order to understand. It's funny because I'm telling you to read a story where Pierro tells Perouer to read a story. But the gist of what happens there is that Pierro essentially reveals a bit of his motivations, and if you want to know more about him and about his character, I recommend you check Perouer's or Arlecchino's character stories and see what he says over there. He is a really cool character, and this animated teaser only serves to improve his characterization. Now, notice his eye.
I remember those eyes.
So, Pierro...
It was
Of course, we see Asmoday's cubes over here and Conria as it is being destroyed.
just before I placed the curse of immortality.
Now, this interaction, specifically being between Pierro and Ronova, is extremely important, because I have to remind you guys, earlier in this trailer, we saw the white crow, and when it comes to the Fatui, who happens to be white? Well, Pierro, the jester in the Italian Commedia dell'arte, is depicted as a white royal jester, which, by the way, is exactly the type of color that Pierro wears at the moment. He wears white clothes. You can see this in Arlecchino's animated short right before she was receiving her membership amongst the Harbingers from the Tsaritsa. We see Pierro's clothes, and he is white. And of course, Pierro, who can see Ronova through the mortal realm and into the heavens above, he is also in that sense, because of his ability to see this really powerful god from all the way down in the mortal realm amongst humanity, he can also be symbolic of Odin, which is something that I did not think about before. However, when it comes to my mind now and I place Pierro as the embodiment of Odin in Genshin, this suddenly unlocks to me a number of extremely interesting theories and routes that we can speculate on. Because you also have to remember that this crow, this exact same crow, later gets killed by Ronova right over here. So the crow flies from Anya, and Ronova, right before she appears, she steps on it. Look. And this, of course, this whole interaction between the crow at the start and then Ronova killing the crow, and the crow representing Odin, and then we transition later into Pierro, where Pierro is able to see Ronova all the way from the heavens, and Ronova mentions how his eyes are familiar to her because she remembers them from Conria. So Pierro might unironically be the Odin of Genshin Impact. Now, I know King Ermin from Conria, he fits Odin much better than Pierro. Characters within the world are able to play similar roles. So if you remember back in Simulanka, we had the Traveler who was supposed to be the savior. However, later down the line, we see Scaramouche who shows up, and he's actually the true savior. And the Traveler's role from then forward transitions into being the observer, the one who watches and records the world. And then, of course, we have the best example of this, which is Ajax the hero, where Ajax the fool, Tartaglia, plays the role of Ajax, and then the original guy whom the Voyager inhabited also plays the role of Ajax within the world of Tevat. So the role of Odin, the idea of Odin, can be fulfilled by Ermin, who plays like the evil Odin in Conria, or the more benevolent, I don't want to say really good because Pierro is probably morally gray, however, the more understandable side of Odin, I guess, in the Ring of Nibelung.
I remember those eyes. It was just before I placed the curse of immortality.
Bro, I like how Pierro in the first half of this trailer is basically just aura farming. Look. He doesn't even say anything. He just sits there like Sung Jin-woo and stares at her as he's just aura farming. And then she aura farms back. This is so funny.
Ah, yes. He's an old acquaintance of mine. I'm sure that working for the Tsaritsa has helped him let go of his past obsessions.
So, of course, Rhinodottir knows Pierro because both of them are from Kandria. It's very obvious that they met each other, especially considering that they both had relatively high positions in the royal Kandrian court. Rhinodottir was the best alchemist in Ermin's Kandria, and Pierro was one of the royal mages.
The Cryo Archon. With her paltry powers, she dares set her gaze on the heavenly principles.
The heavenly principles have yet to awaken. If I were her, I wouldn't pass on that opportunity.
I just realized something. Not just Kiana. If you look at Istaorth over here,
Have yet to awaken.
this is interesting because this is something that I was thinking about a long time ago. In this frame specifically, Istaorth reminds me of Robin, which is Sunday's sister from Penacony and Honkai Star Rail. Kinda reminds me of Robin. I'm not gonna say she is supposed to be a variant of Robin, that's not what I'm trying to say, just throwing this idea out there.
If I were her, I wouldn't pass on that opportunity either. My dear Rhinodottir, you know I cannot allow you to think that way.
So of course right here Naberius is interjecting and telling Rhinodottir that she cannot think of blaspheming the heavenly principles as one of the shades of the heavenly principles. You cannot be thinking of betraying them or targeting them.
I cannot allow
Makes
you
sense,
to think
of course.
that way. It was purely hypothetical, Naberius.
For lack of a direct order, I say it's time we intervened. Of course, to the extent permitted by the rules.
The gaze of the gods has always been considered a blessing. Hence the origin and meaning of visions. People have always yearned for the gaze of the gods. And yet, it is said that when mortals look directly upon the gods, they invite their wrath and retribution.
So every single thing that Pierro is mentioning here is something that we have already heard about or read about in the past in Genshin. We always knew that visions are representations of the gaze of the gods, which in this case sounds to my ears similar to the gaze of the Aeons. It might be metaphorically analogous, doesn't have to be directly though. I'm not saying there's an Aeon into that, that's not what I'm trying to say. But it could be conceptually analogous to what we see in Star Rail, where the gaze of the Aeons allows the Path Striders to gain power and sometimes potentially ascend into the position of emanators. Regardless, the gaze of the gods in Genshin, we always knew visions represent that, at least symbolically, and we always knew that those who look at Celestia can incur their wrath, which is why the scene where Pierro looks at Ronova directly, he pierces through the sky and looks directly at Ronova. He is basically challenging her, he is taunting her, and that is such a massive aura farm. Out of all the characters in Genshin Impact, Pierro is the one so you guys know how I said Finon in Star Rail is the embodiment of the perfect character for me in the Hoyoverse? Well, now since Finon came out, I need another character to fill that position for a perfect upcoming character, and to me, that is going to be Pierro. Now, the unfortunate part
And
is
what
that
of it? Lives will be lost, a nation brought to ruins. So be it.
this
It is
music is
nothing
really good.
I have not endured before. I already know the price of gazing upon the gods. So tell me, what is the price of killing a god? The god stays silent.
So the unfortunate part is that Pierro is old, and Hoyoverse, these cocksuckers, they refuse to sell old characters, which I really hate. And by the way, he's not that old. He's like 50, 54, maybe 45, 50, something along those lines, which is, when I say old, obviously that does not mean geezer. He's relatively old compared to the characters we normally get. What we get is like 20 to 30 maximum. That's what we usually get in terms of appearance, of course. In terms of age, of like Zhongli is 6,000 years old. However, he looks like a 25-year-old, so it doesn't matter. If a character is 9,000 years old and still appeals to the gooners, the character is gonna sell regardless. However, Pierro, he might be 500 years old, but he looks like 45, 50, which is the line that Hoyoverse has never broken yet. I do not think they have released any character in any of their games which is above the age of, appearance-wise, above the age of 35, which really sucks. So I hope Pierro people are gonna say Gallagher. Gallagher literally looks in his 30s, he's not that old. So I really hope Pierro becomes playable. He is super, super cool. But yeah, my hopes are not too up. Even though I really like the character, even though I hope he becomes playable, I don't really think Hoyoverse are gonna pull the trigger. But I really hope they do.
As if the thought had never once.
And by the way, this music is insane. Just listen to it. Hold on.
Be it. It is nothing I have not endured before. I already know the price of gazing upon the gods. So tell me, what is the price of killing a god? The god stays silent, as if the thought had never once crossed his mind. To all those who dare not look up to the heavens, Her Majesty the Tsaritsa says this. Behold, even the gods have their limits.
You can kind of see, by the way, Pierro's white attire underneath his Fatui cloak. You can see it with his white pants right here. And again, once again, this can be representative symbolically of the white crow, and before that, the black crow. And by the way, I just noticed, if you take a look at Pierro during the time when he was looking at Ronova in Khaenri'ah, the clothes he wore were definitely darker than the ones he has right now. He's more black in terms of his coloring. Take a look. You see, he's not very white. So the Pierro of today is really white in terms of his clothes, but the one from Khaenri'ah, he was kind of dark. So this can actually represent the Black Crow Pierro over here. And then the White Crow, which is the current Pierro, the Jester of today. And of course, this is symbolic of Odin's eyes. Odin obviously has two crows called Hugin and Munin, so this could be related to that idea. Yeah, really, really cool symbolism. I love this trailer, and I hope Pierro becomes playable. This is my biggest takeaway. Of course, the shades are all really cool. However, when I look at these shades, I will be honest with you guys, these designs are almost guaranteed to be playable. The one I am worried about is Pierro. Is he actually going to become playable though? Only time will tell. We are still not done with the trailer though. There is one very nice post-credit scene right over here.
Inspection over. Return to your posts.
Make sure the Frostmoon Scions don't pose a threat. Per the Pale Star Edict, we are to retrieve the damselette from Nod Cry, whatever it takes.
So, of course, Colombina is currently in Nodicrai, and for some reason she is lost in Nodicrai, the fact we need to retrieve her back. Nonetheless, I am looking forward to see what Pierro is trying to do. He says, what is the price for killing a god? Which means he plans to do something like that very, very soon. And he, of course, has the Tsaritsa on his side, who herself should be Bronya, at least given how Raiden is Mei, given how the Sustainer is Kiana. The third one, the Tsaritsa, the last one, should be Bronya, and of course Himiko in Genshin is supposed to be Mavuika. So yeah, the Tsaritsa should probably be a Bronya variant. And Bronya, of course, as we know, is the Hersher of Truth or the Hersher of Reason. The reason that might replace the Logos of the Heavenly Principles. Which is, at the end of the day, one of Pierro's objectives as he seeks to create a new world and burn the old one to dust. This is the promise he made to Rosaline, La Signora, back in Winter Night's Lazo. At any rate, thank you all for watching. Let me know if I missed anything interesting in the comments. Feel free to share your own theories. As always, a huge thanks to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon, and thank you for watching till here. For now, I've been My Name for Now, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.